Firstly, let me just welcome everyone here. I know I said earlier, I know that you could be anywhere, but you've given up some time to come and show support to CERC and to hear about the current state of Christian education. And so I want to thank you for that. I might just start with a prayer. I think that would be appropriate. So if I could just ask you to bow your heads for a moment, we'll have a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just want to thank you as Creator God, Lord. We just bring everything that we do today to you as we reflect on Christian education, Lord, and the transforming ability it has in our lives, Lord. We just pray that you will bless us, that you'll be with us. We want to pray a special prayer for Dean as he speaks to us today also. And yeah, we just give you thanks, Lord, for your grace and mercy and love. Amen. I just want to make a few just introductory comments. For those of you who have been part of a book process, written a book, been a part of it, it is a fairly large undertaking. And I did know that when I stepped into the role of putting together or helping to put together a book for CERC, just how big it was. I didn't probably fully grasp that, but thankfully I had Kirsty to work with, and she'd been there and done that, and was able to kind of guide me through some of those little spaces. But obviously a book like this doesn't come together without a lot of kind of hands being a part of it. And so there are a number of people that I really want to give thanks to who have played a part along the way. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes just to I guess, express my gratitude to those people who have been part of that. So firstly, for those of you who don't know, the book that we're celebrating today, I should probably have a copy of it in my hand, is actually the fourth volume in the Revealing Jesus in the Classroom. I guess you would call it a series now, given that there's four. But the first three of these were not put together by myself and Kirsty. They were actually put together by Peter Kilgour and Bev, who are both here today. So I don't want to embarrass you, but I'm assuming everyone knows who these people are, so I won't ask you to stand up. But I do just want to acknowledge the work that you guys had done. I just think this was such a beautiful thing in so many ways. To be able to draw on people's experiences, to be able to encourage and inspire and maybe motivate other Christian educators through their own experiences and the successes that they'd had in their classroom settings and through the research that they'd undertaken, I think is a really powerful thing. And so in that sense, I want to thank you guys for kind of having this initiative and getting it started, and for the first three volumes that I know that for me, myself, I managed to get a hold of a copy of and have appreciated. For the fourth one, I really need to give thanks to Kirsty. So Kirsty, I might ask you, are you happy to come up and stand next to me for a minute for this one? Those of you who know Kirsty know that she has a very strong work ethic. She's a doer, and I love working with people who are like that because things get done and our ideas have been able to come to fruition. So I want to thank you, Kirsty. Kirsty did so much in the background and up front as well, but liaising with our chapter contributors, some of who are here today, I'll get to you all in a moment. Yeah, just a phenomenal job of just kind of continuing to keep things moving along, being in dialogue with the chapter contributors in the background, and just being a bouncing board for, I guess, some of my crazy ideas involving cover and layout and chapters to include or whatnot, all of that. So thank you. And I've got a little gift for you. Just small, but thank you. That's for you as well. Thank you. This will come a little bit as unexpected, but David Potter, I'm asking if you might come and stand next to me as well. Thank you. I'm going to give a gift to David as well. One of the challenges that we had, and one of the big picture things, just stand with me for a minute, stand with me. Early on, it was very, very important to me in this book that we gave an opportunity for it to have a global feel. I wanted that for this book. And that involved working with a couple of groups who were in other country contexts. We've got contributors that have come from as far as Romania, Canada, the US, And this year we actually had a group from Fulton in the South Pacific. And I have to be honest, there was a time there where the guys at Fulton had a beautiful chapter. If you get your hands on a copy of the book, and I have some copies here, feel free to come and see me after. I'll happily give you one. They had a beautiful idea they wanted to kind of capture, but they acknowledged to me very early on that they didn't have a great deal of experience in terms of academic writing. And so early on, I tried to kind of navigate them a little bit through that and work with them, hear their ideas, give them some ideas on how, you know, they could structure the chapter, etc. But it soon became very clear that they were going to need some real support. And I reached out to David. I knew that he knew their context, and I asked him if he would be happy to work with them and their team, because I think there was 6, possibly 8 people who contributed into the chapter. And David said he would, and I really appreciated that, because at that particular point in time, I was very, very keen for them to have the opportunity to share their experiences, because it was just a beautiful tapestry of just their experience of working one-on-one alongside students in their context. And David, I just want to thank you for being willing to work with them and for leading that process out. And it turned into a great chapter, and really glad it's in this book. So thank you. The last people that I want to thank are the chapter contributors. Obviously, this book doesn't come together without, you know, your hand being right through this. And I'm glad to see a couple of you here today. Please stick around at the end. I would love to kind of have a conversation with you and just have a few minutes with you to say thank you. But such a great group to work with. This is obviously only the first time that I've ever done it, but every single one of these people, when we reached out to them, you know, to remind them of due dates or things that needed to happen in the process, ask them to sign forms at the back end, you know, just every interaction that we had with all of these chapter contributor groups was just a really positive experience. And I thank you so much for making it easy. And I hope that you're happy with how your chapter is wound up, how it situates within the book, and that it's been a really enjoyable process for you. So thank you. Just a couple of really quick comments from me. I guess just putting this book together, you'll notice the theme that we ran with this year was in celebration of teaching. And that was a theme that kind of came to mind for me, because obviously just prior to this, we'd seen kind of 2 years through the pandemic period where teaching in a lot of ways, shapes and forms had fundamentally changed. And it was interesting surveying kind of some of the literature around what those changes were and what they look like. And I actually kind of, for myself, was looking at it through a lens of, you know what, these teachers are reporting the need to have more personal relationships with the students, one-on-one, the way that they were interacting and in communication and contact with these students, their families. There was just a range of things that were kind of happening in that space that kind of called my attention to the reality of what I think Christian education is really about. And if I reflect on that, and you will see it yourselves, when we look at the model of Jesus' teaching, it was very much built like that. Storytelling, parables, one-on-one interactions. You know, it was relational. It was relevant to them. It was personalized in a lot of ways. The examples that he used that were indicative of the times that the people could identify with, that allowed him to share really complex spiritual insights with them, and to encourage them to apply them in their own life. And to me, that's the essence of Christian education, isn't it? That's what the model is. That's what we aspire to be like, to develop those relationships and to have that opportunity to transform and impress and inspire. And so as I look back on that, I got to thinking, what does Christian education look like now, 2023? What's Christian education look like? Have we moved away from that? Is that still something that's at the foremost part of our mind when we, you know, undertake teaching? And I realized that there's about 6 things that came to mind for me, 6 characteristics that kind of underpin Christian education. And I just want to share these really, really quickly, and we might move on from there. But firstly, they're underpinned by a biblical foundation. That's really important. Christian education. It has a focus on character development, seeking to grow our students in a holistic way. We're familiar with that. The third thing is we want to integrate faith and learning. And that's obviously we've seen a big shift in that space over time, but that's obviously a really important character of effective Christian education. We've got emphasis on service and compassion. We've got community and relationships, relationships with our students, relationships with our colleagues, teacher colleagues, relationships with our families, our stakeholder groups. Community and relationships important in Christian education. And the last one there is a respect for diversity. And I feel like all 6 of those characteristics this book touches into. And I think that's really important. I think, that's something I'm really very happy to see kind of come through in this book is there is an opportunity there for everyone to kind of engage with that process. And for me, that sums up Christian education. So really, really important kind of little space there to see kind of immerse our book chapters through. And I'm really happy to see all of that come through. So I'm just going to wrap up really, really quickly. I'm going to ask Alicia to come up. Alicia is here as a representative from the library and also obviously has an interest in this space. But I'm going to officially give you a copy of this. I'm going to ask you to take that back to the library. And I'm looking forward to coming up there at some point and seeing it alongside the previous 3 volumes that I know are there upstairs in the library. So thank you. You can take that back. I might close the book launch up there and hand over to Dean. I might invite Dean to come up just really quickly. Let me introduce Dean. Dean left a very real impression. He doesn't know this. He left an impression on me as a young 21-year-old student. I was actually here at Avondale on my 3rd year teaching prac. I was under Hayley Ferris down at the Central Coast. I learned a lot from Hayley. She was great. But I can remember staying back one afternoon there. This is before you had the nice new big basketball stadium that's down there now. This is back when, it was just a hall, had a little basketball court there. And I stuck around one afternoon after the day had finished and just put a few shots up. And at some point, Dean wandered in. And he stopped and took the time to just put a few shots up with me. I don't know, you probably have no recollection of this, but yeah. He took the time and we just chatted for a couple of minutes and he put a few shots up. He was in full dress attire, I think well, that's it, in your work clothes, professional dress. And he was out there, just chatting to, no one. And I kind of went away from that and thought, that's pretty cool that the principal of the school would just stop whatever tasks he's in the middle of and spend a few minutes with me. And that left a great impression on me. So Dean, now CEO of North New South Wales Evidence Schools, and very, very close to Christian education. So really interested to hear what you have to share with us about your reflections and what you see in the Christian education space in 2023.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Happy to share. Are you okay if I don't use this? You can hear me all right? Okay, I'll use the mic. Thank you so much. What school did you go to? Actually, I would have been so avoiding doing work. That's what I would have been doing. Pretty much would love a conversation. I know it's going to be hard, but we'll see how the afternoon goes, just this little bit of time together. I have to start this way, though. I am surprised that there are as many of you here, because when I saw the flyer, it was really, really clear to me that Pete put my name in big red letters, meaning stay away. Couldn't you find 72 point, to make it even bigger than you did? And I think the reason for the warning, and I'm now retracting everything that I was thinking about you as a potential audience, is that I perceived myself as a blunt instrument, that I was the hammer turning up in a room of scalpels. But I'm now reassessing that because there's so many people here. What I want to do just for a little while is to give you, and this is the, right up front, this is the world according to Dean. And I live in the world of opinion, don't have a lot of empirical evidence to back it up. I'll leave that to you to filter through. But what I do want to start with though, is to share with you context, because for me, context is everything. As Pete shared my time in school land and now into my current role, I suppose my vision, my ability to see over the horizon has just gone a little wider and a little broader as I've taken each step that I have away from school land. And I now realize that there is a lot of external influence on what we do as educators and what we do inside Christian education that perhaps, and I'll put my hand up, even when I was principal, didn't necessarily think deeply into. So I'm going to, and look, I am a art teacher by training, so I can't help but scribble and draw. And if you do math, don't try and add everything up because it doesn't equal 100, all right? So it's pretty close. So if I do this just really quickly, and I know for many of you here, you're going to know this. Well, yeah, 20, actually, I'll call it 21. That's more accurate. We'll go 0 to 100. So in 1971, on the census, 86% of Australian population identified as Christian. So on the 21 census, it's 43. Okay, that's fairly telling. I don't write the wrong number. 0.7 identified as no religion, and 38% now identify that way. And the final one, interestingly, 0.8%, so not even one, and now 10% identify as something other, Muslim, Jew, Hindu, something other. That to me is a really interesting shape, a really interesting triangle, a really interesting potential, and I'll explain a little bit more why. Two things predominantly have influenced on this, and the very simple reading that I've done over my career. Number one, we have to acknowledge migration. We have to acknowledge the impact migration has had on Australia. We've become a global destination. We weren't, and then we have become one. And so that influence filters through community, and it has a place to play in our choice regarding religion. The other thing is secularism. So global destination, and we like turning churches into wineries. And I say that in a cheeky sense, but that's what we've done. If you look at our history, the Catholic Church and the Church of England, the Anglican Church, in every country town, and I'm a dairy farmer's son, would fight for the best spot in the middle of town, on the hill. We would see that evidenced around Australia. Now, not necessarily all of those, but a lot of those, especially in some rural hubs, they are now cafes. They are now wineries. They are no longer used as places of worship. And you can sort of understand why, because the demand profile just isn't there. People aren't interested in using them for the purpose that they were intended. So context is everything. Now, I'm going to share some numbers with you. I won't write them down because there's a whole bunch of them, but I just want you to listen to these. So if we take that as our context, and I'll go back, actually, no, I'll start now and I'll work backwards. So I'll make a comment on the present, I'll make a comment on 5 years ago, and I'll make a comment on 10 years ago. So at the moment, and this is based on current data, the growth rate of education, of schooling in Australia can be divided up in this regard. The independent sector is growing at 2.3%. The state sector is growing at 1.1%, and the Catholic sector is growing at 0.6%. Now, what is interesting is the Christian subset of schools is growing at 2.8. So it is growing greater than the other three. And it's the first time in a long time, statistically, that that has been the case. Now, if I go back in time, and again, apologies, I've not had enough time to interrogate the data all the way back. But if I just look at independent schooling in general, so in the past 5 years, independent schooling has grown by 12.5%, Catholic 3.9, state 1.9. And if I look across the last decade, it's even more pronounced. 25% independent, 11 state, and 8 Catholic. Now, the AIS of New South Wales, and I can't comment on the other states again because I haven't dug too deep there. But again, statistically, inside New South Wales, the majority of the growth of independent school is attributed to faith-based schooling. Now, keep in mind, I'm using that language intentionally because that does include our Islamic schools inside our state boundary. But again, the predominant bias of that growth is inside the Christian school network. So I just need you to process this because, and as you rightly pointed out, when we look at your 6 principles, I think of the words that you were using, they are all part of the attractors, the attraction. But I guess I want to touch on this afternoon just 3 positions that I think families take in regards to why they choose to plug into faith-based schooling, and in particular, why they choose to plug into Christian schooling. And here are the 3 things. The first thing I call, and I borrow this, so if he ends up watching it, Paul Campy, who some of you know. He and I have been friends for decades. He does follow the Hawthorn Football Club, which is a real problem for me. So I normally don't spend too much time with him. But despite that failing in his life, he shared with me maybe 2 decades ago a comment, and he talked about nostalgic Christians, people that look back on their Christian upbringing with a positive, warm glow. Over the years of talking about this with him, it is now clicked in my head that when we look at this number here, there is a good portion of nostalgic Christians in there who were brought up inside a faith context, went to a church, whatever flavor on or whatever color on the kaleidoscope they went to, but for their own choosing decided to step away from formalized religion. They've decided to stop attending whatever mum and dad brought them up in. But they've become a parent and they've gone, oh my goodness, this is really difficult. How on earth am I going to raise my kids? And they go back into their memory banks and they go, how did mum and dad do it? How was I brought up? And nostalgia kicks in and they go, I might not buy into organized religion anymore, but there are values, there are positions that were evident in my schooling, inside faith-based schooling, inside Christian schooling, that I want to re-plug into. So nostalgia leads them to reconsider Christian schooling as a viable option. So that would be number 1. Number 2 is what I call aisle 5. Parents are aspirational. Parents are aspirational for their children, not just in academics, but in character, in regards to their positioning that they have in community, in society. And so this is what happens. Family A walks down aisle 5 at the local grocery store. Coming from the other direction is family B. And the kids are in the uniform. And as I said, no empirical data, and this is just me giving you anecdotal evidence. But family B is walking the other way. The kids are in the uniform of the local, say, local Adventist or Baptist or whatever Christian school, and the kids are speaking respectfully to mum and dad. They're not kicking a Weet Bix packet down. They're helping people pick things up when they drop it. They're speaking with respect. And so the aspirational family goes, as they watch their kids go feral around their feet, go, I need some help. And clearly whatever is happening there is working. The other thing that happens in aisle 5 is that we bump into each other. We know each other through some social setting. And I say to Pete, gee, what's happened with your kids? Like I saw them the other day and they seem really happy. And Pete starts to unpack to me and goes, oh yeah, we changed school. We changed school and we've gone to this other school. And it happens in this case, it's a faith-based school. And he starts telling me about everything that is happening as a result of that change. And don't get me wrong, marketing, promotion has a place. School budgets need them, and we have them, and we have to be very judicious in how we use them. But nothing trumps aisle 5. That dad telling this dad about his kids, and I see the empirical evidence standing beside him, and I go home and share with my wife. So number 1, you've got nostalgic Christians. Number 2, you've got aisle 5. And in an attempt at blatant branding and marketing, I call the third one the bridge. I just want to put that out there. So the third one is connections. So again, let's go back to what I said at the start, and you think of Australian society and you think of what churches, and even so, if you don't know, dairy farmer's son, born and bred, rural southern Victoria. That's why I'm an arrogant Victorian when it comes to football, can't help it. The local church's expression of community was evident not just on a Sunday, not just on a Saturday. So if I look at my home church, your home church, men, church wasn't one day a week. Things were happening all the time. Now, granted, most of us were relatives and we had blur points, but it was all the time. That doesn't exist except now in pockets. And so what happens in schools and what happens in the more successful schools that are able to embed community is that they find ways to plug in beyond 8 till 4. They find ways to meet community need. Interesting statistic. It's a general thing, but I can tell you from our case. During COVID, so our net growth, and for those that are unfamiliar, North New South Wales education starts at Gosford and goes through to the Queensland border. We've got 10 schools. During COVID, so pre-COVID, we were growing at about 2.5. So we're about on par with those stats that I read out before. We're right in that sort of sweet spot. COVID comes along, aisle 5 happens, we grow at 3.4, 3.8%. We have a look just this year because we've got that thing called Session. I don't know if you know about it. It's called the beauty pageant that we do every 4 years and we see who's looking the best. So I'm running the numbers for that for my report, and we've had over 8, nearly 9% growth over the last 4 years. And I praise God for that because it's aisle 5. And the reason I know it's aisle 5 is I've had the chance to talk to families and go, so how come you're with us? It's the meal train that was created for the family that was really struggling, whose friends saw them getting a meal train from the school, who then came and joined. It's the family that noticed, oh, the teachers drove around to all of their classes dropping off the books and the equipment, or it was the drive-ins, literal drive-ins that we were creating on our school campuses so that families had something to do on a Saturday night and they would come and park their cars and watch a movie on the big screen. I know it sounds all really simple, but that's because it is. Because when you look at expression of faith, again, world according to me, it is simple. It's hands and feet ministry. I was saying just earlier to some folk in another meeting today, my delineation of my walk of faith and the thing that should make me different, I should be selfless, not selfish. And that's how I see my Christian faith expressed. And that's what schools are doing, because school membership, or no, strike that, school enrollment isn't church membership. I don't want to freak anyone out, but it's not. It's different, and it should be different, because it should be fit for purpose. And so when I look at those three things that influence back to this triangle, I do. I think of them as points of difference. I think of them as the influences, the impactors upon the decision-making that families are making. And we know statistically, and this is truth, that families are making those choices, that Christian schooling isn't diminishing in demand. It's actually increasing. Now, I've lived through, this is my third wave. In 97, I became a principal, and I was the back end of the first wave of Christian schooling. Then towards the early, mid, late thousands-ish, there was a second wave that rolled through. And then God's blessing, here it comes, COVID brings a third wave of growth inside Christian schooling. And so I do apply to it nostalgic Christians, aisle 5, and as I said there at the end, the bridge, connections. Because when you think about it, all schools are doing is living out what churches have done for generations. Things like meal trains, things like going and visiting people in their home. If you're in the room and you're Adventist, you'll know before Sabbath school and you're ticking the boxes of persons helped and things handed out and all of those tangible expressions of what faith is, Christian schooling is doing intuitively because it's part of our DNA. And what I would contend and put to you, and I'm nearly done, would be we foster it. We foster it, we grow it, we don't overcomplicate it. We release our school leaders, we provide, and I love what is happening here. We provide empirical research to back up mad ravings, because there's a whole bunch of people like me out there that have done it and we've got the scars, but we don't have evidence. But that's where the scalpels can help the hammers, because we need that sort of assistance. Now, that's a really broad overview, but as I said at the start, I'm really open to some discursive elements to this. If anyone wants to make a reflection, anyone wants to throw a chair, throw it that way. Any comments or observations? I'm not pushing for it. If there is, I'd love to hear though.
There's just one thing that the research says that I thought be interesting. When they're in aisle 5, it's actually the mums that talk rather than the dads.
You've just downplayed us men. What did you do that for? Yes, I was elevating us. That is interesting though. Okay. Yeah, it is the mums. It is the mums. And I would believe that. I would believe that. Any other?
Dean, I'm really interested in what happens in, say, another 20, 30 years with these curves and graphs on the screen. Have you done tried to get your head around what this might look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? If these numbers from the census keep going the way they are, the size of that nostalgic group who fondly remember a Christian childhood is going to significantly diminish. Will the future nostalgic ones think Christian school? Will they think private school? Is there any thinking around that?
So yeah, 2 comments. I would like to think that the volume, percentage, number of the nostalgic Christians plugging in will create a bit of an engine room that it will self-sustain, that it will continue. But even if I say, you know, they completely cross over and it's very different, I make this analogy too. My hope and dream for not just Adventist education, but Christian education in general, is that we take on and we take ownership of being firemen and firewomen. And for as long as that we can run into the building to get someone out, we just keep doing it. And so for me, Matthew 28 is real. For me, where it says go and tell, go and do, is what I feel we're called to do inside Christian education. And, you know, again, Adventist education is evolving its mindset. And that is not criticism, it's observation, because once we were Adventist schools for Adventist kids to reinforce an Adventist mindset. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we birthed our schools. That's how we nearly had 100 schools here in Australia. We've now got 48. Now we've got more kids than we had then by heaps. And it's, again, not a failing that we don't have that many schools, but the philosophical and organizational position at that time was, if the Adventist kids left, what did we do? We closed the school. Because I would suggest to you that we hadn't fully understood that that isn't oppositional to Matthew 28 and sharing the message of Jesus that we share to our kids. Possessive language, did you hear me? Our kids, actually with everybody. And so we get this mission opportunity, and they're not in any conflict. They in fact reinforce. So that would be, you know, I remember growing up, going to the train station with my mother to pick up the 8mm track of Sabbath school mission spotlight that we'd take home and put on the projector and play for our church. I remember that. And I used to think, wow, imagine being a missionary. Well, I'll tell you straight up, the only place you got to go to be a missionary in Adventist education is the car park. That is the only place you got to go. So that would be my hope and dream. So I'm not scared by the numbers. I'm excited by the numbers for the potential for mission growth. That really grabs me. And we'll just keep running into the fire until it's too late, and then we pack it all up and go home. Oh. Okay. Not sure if someone can. Do we know if this growth in Adventist schools enrolments has happened in other parts of Australia, the region and the world in the COVID context? So I can comment on Australia. Yes, there has been growth inside Adventist education nationally. I mean, it's all pocketed, because even if you look at North New South Wales, we've still got some schools that they might have gone up one or two, gone down one or two, but then there are others because of demography, and that's a whole nother topic today. You cannot ignore demography. That is always going to drive what happens inside schools. But around the world, and this is as I've listened to others speak, and sadly, and I do feel for these areas, it's actually cost schools. They've had to close. There has been restrictions. Yeah. And the next one. Issue of teacher supply, where students leaving school haven't gone to Sunday school or churches, massive teacher shortage in Christian schools. Yeah, look, absolutely. We experienced overall in excess of a 10% loss of staff as a result of COVID. And we were closing in on nearly 12%. What are we up to, 23, 22? Yeah, so end of 21, start of 22, we were under providing in the sense that we didn't have enough bodies. We are recovering. What I do affirm, and I affirm Avondale University for endeavouring to be at the front of the dialogue. I sit on a group called the GAIN Committee, which is run by the AIS, that is looking at ways to entice teaching, the uplift in teaching in general. But I do feel that the greatest responsibility for perpetuating Christian teachers in Christian schools is the Christian teachers themselves. I've said this for my entire career. Teachers are the closest to being self-employed that you can be as a wage earner. because everything that you do and say in the classroom impacts on Jenny and Johnny, and Jenny and Johnny go home and tell mum and dad, and that circle operates. And the same applies to, and I have to take ownership of this. When was the last time I spoke life into an undergraduate high school student, primary school student, and said, have you thought of teaching? Gee, you did a great job with that presentation in year 3. Have you thought of teaching? I think we've become a little bit complacent and think the machine will look after itself. We as practitioners need to take ownership. That would be my comment. Growth in Adventist enrollments has been static past 10 years mainly. Yeah, look, it's certainly, again, pocket to pocket, and then nationally, you're going to find some really different statistics. I would suggest respectfully, because again, not knowing other contexts, but schools that work hard on, throwaway line, on being a part of, not apart from the community, are witnessing the greatest growth. And again, I'm happy to say this amongst, I say it publicly anyway. We often see schools with the highest Adventist percentage as growing the least. And that's because aisle 5 doesn't happen. There's just not enough critical mass for that to happen. And again, and I'm not saying right or wrong, but if your position here, there is a finite amount of influence you can exert. But if you position there and here, it scales up and aisle 5 starts to happen. Because as Adventists, again, observation, not criticism, we're not necessarily out there doing the aisle 5 with our non-Adventist neighbors, friends, connections, etc. And maybe we should, maybe we could. Maybe that's a coachable moment for us as schools as well. Sorry.
My question would be, what percentage do you think is aisle 5 or Bunnings? You didn't say Bunnings. Yeah, Bunnings is where the dudes are. Yeah. What percentage would be aisle 5? What percentage would be those that were Christians? But also what percentage would be where money comes in? Yeah. So money in that we are a private school, but cheaper. And then during COVID, maybe some that were going to grammar schools couldn't afford 16,000 and came down to our school.
Really good observation. So when we had the recession that we needed to have, thank you, Mr. Keating, the economists came back with a response that has held true ever since. And that is that when we go into any form of economic downturn, Australians, so I'm generalizing, but Australians try and hold on to 3 things, but then they let them go in this order. They let go of the second car first, they let go of the family holiday to Noosa second, and they try and hang on to private schooling third. And I call them finger tippers. And we have lots of finger tippers in our schools that are just there. You know, mum and dad, if their hours change, then they're under duress. Now, COVID, and keep in mind, now I'm flipping into almost an economist set of language suite here, but school enrollment is a long-term relationship. You know, you can be connected with a family for upwards of 25 years if they've got enough kids. Now, the reality of that means I can extend, I'm talking now as a principal, I can extend a repayment plan. I can turn around and go, oh, you owe 100% of your fees and we needed to operate, and we did this during COVID, but we'll turn it into 40% and we'll throw that across the next 10 years and we amortize it and we work with families, or we give remissions. Every single Adventist school does remissions. Every single Adventist school, and I'm trying to get my language right, makes it possible for Adventists to stay there on a price point. Not all do, and there's often other influences around that financial piece. So the extension of the financial comment that is actually really important contextually. Australia has moved to a direct measure of income when it comes to establishing recurrent government grants for schools. So back in the day, okay, quick summary. Back in the day, an LGA or a suburb, I'll use that language, would be given an average score by the government and say, okay, if you live here and you are now at Mossman in Sydney, you look like Mossman types, actually, now I've said that. You're not going to get much government grants. Sorry. But my friends over here at Gilliston Heights or Maitland or Cessnock, you're going to get more. That's gone. Because back then that was really hard as a school administrator to work out how to set and manage fees. Now, and please don't freak out and run out and shut down your bank accounts, but the government now know everything that they need to know about you. And they use big data. So Medicare, tax returns, Centrelink, everything about you that's financial to build an individualized model. So if everyone from Mossman moves to here, that funding is going to go with them. So this area suddenly has a drop in funding and vice versa. So to answer that really specifically, that's actually advantageous for faith-based schooling. It's really advantageous for us because in a general sense, and I used the word before, aspirational families, more often than not, faith-based families, certainly Adventists, are middle income Australia to lower middle income Australia, which has a whole aspiration suite attached to it, which means that in the norm or on average, we're going to get a better level of funding, meaning we can drop our fee expectation. So the fee sustainability, I'm not concerned about. This current funding model is, what word? Is politically agnostic. So even though we've now got Labor, doesn't matter, it's not up for a review until 2030. And I can tell you now, and this was a meeting yesterday, you know those other numbers, and I'm happy to share them via you if you like, Pete. It is impossible, like dead set, just on pure numbers. It is impossible for the government to shut down our independent and Catholic schools because the kids have nowhere to go. Like literally nowhere to go. I only know New South Wales data, but the growth here, last 15 years, independent schooling grew by nearly 45,000 kids. The next 15 expected to grow by 80,000 kids inside 240,000 kids inside the state of New South Wales. Over 30, 35 new schools are required. If we go back on the last 15 years, the government education invested $5 billion in capital development works over the last 15 to 20 years. One of those $1 billion came from the state government. Where'd the other four come from? Us. Adventist schooling, Christian schooling, Islamic schooling, because we self-fund. Building loans, donations, appropriations. We funded 4/5. See, an art teacher can do math. That can't change. It can't change or it would break the budget, the national budget. So yeah, I'm sort of stitching you both together in that I am concerned, and please, I'm not being, what's the word? I'm not trying to downplay our future. It is a challenging future, but I'm not apprehensive, not even one bit. And as I said before, if it all does go up in a puff of smoke, it just means we're going home. So there we go. I better stop talking because I'll just keep going.
I kept your seat warm for you, Dean. But I've got a gift for you. I did promise that I would give you a gift when you accepted this and made that commitment.
Thank you so much.
So there
Much
you go.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Two things just to finish. Firstly, thank you again all for coming. I hope that you will stick around and grab a copy of the book, take it away and have a look at it. There's some amazing chapters in there. We've got people sharing a narrative of their life experience. We've got research papers. We've got people who are reflecting on, society's needs and the role of Christian education within that. There's a range of chapters in there that I think there's something for everyone. So I'd definitely encourage you to take a copy away with you. I've got more in my office if I run out. So, just stick around if you're interested. I've got a copy for you. Second thing is, I can still see food over there. So please make sure you take something away. I had no appetite at the start, but I'll probably make my way over there now that the stress of this is about to end. I was worried about me, mate, not you. But yeah, just thank you, and yeah, I just hope that this book is a blessing going forwards, and really proud of the work that has gone into it from our chapter contributors through to Kirsty behind the scenes, and I just hope that's a blessing going forward, because I know the first 3 volumes have had real impact. So that's my hope and prayer. So thank you, thanks for being here.